Hey, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to our CompuGain's DevOps webinar. Thanks for joining, and appreciate you spending time with us. Hope this will be rewarding. We have a nice set of things to share with you, and we will be showing you a live demo. But basically, the agenda is as follows. We are going to be presenting our DevOps maturity model. We'll have a discussion on our framework applied to a financial services case study, and then we'll almost spend about 30 minutes doing our live demo, demonstrating our tool chain and demonstrating our total solution. So before we launch into the DevOps, just a quick overview of CompuGain. We are an advanced and emerging technology solutions provider. We are about 60 million in revenue, 2016. 15 years in business. Like I said, with a heavy focus on the advanced technologies like cloud, big data, DevOps, microservices. We are also very active in multiple verticals, financial services and healthcare, and then we also have some significant experience in some of the other verticals. Lastly, just wanted to share with you that we have built a rich ecosystem of partners, both on the cloud side and the DevOps side, as well as on the microservices side. So just to name a few, we have Amazon Web Services, we have Azure, we are partners with Lightbend on the microservices side, and on the DevOps tool chain, we work a lot with CloudBees, we work with Chef, with GitHub. So just to name a few. Here's a sample, list of clients. We are not going to discuss anything here, but we're going to be, talking a lot in the case study about the work we have done around DevOps, applying our maturity model to a very large financial services enterprise. So, before we start on DevOps, we wanted to kind of say, what is the ultimate destination for DevOps? What is the final objective? What is the end goal here? What is the end game? Everybody, I think, that we have talked to, eventually wants to be in a position to have a single pane of glass, being able to have a clear view of where their enterprise SDLC is, have a clear line of sight. So here's a snapshot of what we do. We use an open source tool called Hygia, that shows you once you've reached certain levels of maturity, you have a complete line of sight into the SDLC. Like I said, just to quickly go through what you see here on the screen on the left hand, top corner, you see the metrics and measures around your sprints. At the bottom there is your velocity of code being committed to your code repositories, the work of the development team there. And then in the middle, you'll see at the top, how the builds are going. And then at the bottom, you see a lot of feedback and metrics around code quality. And on the right-hand side, we see some of the details from the monitoring, and then also the deployments that are going on. So we augment these dashboards with other dashboards. We have which we will discuss and show, for example, with Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. So to us, DevOps is part of the enterprise transformation trends we're seeing. We see four major trends, and then the convergence of these trends. At the top, we see the programmable infrastructure. This is the low-hanging fruit. This is kind of the beginning of the DevOps journey for a lot of the customers we work with. We worked with in the past. They build the CI/CD, the continuous integration, continuous delivery pipelines. Starting to look at infrastructure as code. Building scriptable architectures, and then this is where we often hear the term no-touch deployment. Kind of removing some of the the manual processes. So that's the starting point, and then we see enterprises mature into a containerization, leveraging platform as a service tools like OpenShift, and deploying into Docker containers, managing using tools like Kubernetes, and that's to us we have seen often organizations are doing that from a second stage. or beyond. And then another major trend we have seen is the leveraging the microservices architecture, particularly building the new reactive architectures, converting a lot of the existing monolithic applications that were built in the last 10 to 12 years into microservices. We have seen our customers work with domain-driven design and leveraging frameworks like Lagom and Spring Boot to deploy microservices. And then lastly, we have seen organizations spending a lot on leveraging data, being data-driven organizations, and applying data science, applying machine learning, applying artificial intelligence and neural networks. To us, DevOps, like I said, is part of the journey. So today we're going to talk about our DevOps journey. We'll start with our DevOps approach, and our DevOps approach is something that we have honed, over a number of engagements, working with a number of customers, and then this is a result of bringing the experienced implementations from multiple customers. The key fundamental principle that that underlies a lot of our approach around DevOps is ruthless automation of everything. Right? We want to automate everything, wherever possible. It's the scriptable architecture, leveraging Chef, Ansible, shell scripts, whatever it takes to automate wherever possible, and use this. But overall, in our approach, we focus on building DevOps teams, helping customer transition, their culture from their existing culture to DevOps culture, embracing small teams, that own, pieces and that are responsible all the way to production, the software they do. And then help implement continuous integration, continuous delivery, building those delivery pipelines. We've seen that, like I mentioned before, it's the first step, it's the low-hanging fruit. And then, we incorporate, continuous testing, quality, doing infrastructure tests, regression tests. And then finally, as organizations mature, we've seen more and more focus around metrics and monitoring and building those immutable infrastructures. So our approach incorporates tools, frameworks, best practices across all of these. And then underlying all of this, the underpinning of our approach, is a maturity model, which we're going to share with you shortly, as well as a relentless focus on security and then change management. So the final result of implementing the DevOps approach is for us to bring these technical, cultural, and business benefits, to our customers. And these benefits that we've enumerated here on this slide is also the basis. It's the requirements, for our maturity model, and feeds into the maturity model, and how we assess, customers, and how we help them, migrate from one level of the maturity model to the other. So we've been talking a lot about our maturity model. Just wanted to share with you the details of the maturity model. From maturity model concept, is something that's been in the industry. There are examples, software maturity models using CMM, CMMI. We have other maturity models in other areas. So we've adopted the one from Diabol's. We took the initial definitions, but we have done a lot of detailed work around these levels, and and then added a lot of implementation details. We use the maturity models to assess organizations. We identify gaps, and then develop action plans and roadmaps to help organization mature from one level to the other. But at the end of the day, the focus is to help get better ROI, and then improve the time to market. What do we do with our maturity model, and what are the dimensions and capabilities we measure? So you can see on the left-hand side here are the dimensions or the capabilities we measure and assess an organization on. The first one is organization culture. Second one is the capability around build and deployment. And then the third one is around testing and verification, and lastly, monitoring and management. This is where continuous feedback loops, continuous improvement. How is the company, handling a lot of those, our customers handling a lot of those kinds of details. So, along with this, we have built, survey questionnaires, we have scorecards, we have built run books, and then we have a number of purpose-built frameworks and accelerators, that will help us, basically take an organization, within weeks, move them one level up in the maturity ladder. So here are some details of the maturity model. Just wanted to share some of the best practices and tools. So I think you can see in the initial stage, typically we've seen organizations, focusing on manual deployment, and then a lot of the reporting is manual. And then the tool sets typically we've seen are using things like Ant and Maven in a Java environment, using JUnit or NUnit, for unit testing, and then often we see things like SVN and ClearCase in terms of the version control for code repositories. At a managed level is where we see organizations starting to use agile methodology. They leverage tools like Jira and Rally. They do automated deployment. So we start seeing the introduction of tools like Jenkins. We have incorporated this as we help organizations in terms of standardizing on Jenkins. We've seen coverage and code analysis with tools like SonarQube. We also see automated builds, using Maven and Gradle, and then we're also, we incorporate, tools like Git and Bitbucket, in addition to the tools you saw, like SVN ClearCase, moving, from a code repository perspective, making it a key part of the overall tool chain, for manage. And then measured, building upon the capabilities and the tool sets in stage 1 and 2, we see the deployments which were automated in stage 2. Now we have standardized deployments. We have seen with our customers, we helped do one enterprise app, and now we are extending the capabilities to a portfolio of apps. We are standardizing deployment across all of these applications. And also, we have seen increased testing, leveraging tools like Selenium and Cucumber. From a measurement perspective, we have seen things like Hygia, ELK, the dashboards we saw, and then some additional testing tools like Server Spec for infrastructure testing, and then we use tools like Fortify for vulnerability scanning. And lastly, from an optimized level perspective, here's where we incorporate tools, like for communication. We have seen tools, more modern tools like Slack and HipChat. For testing, we leverage Netflix tools like Janitor Monkey, and a lot of the testing tools that Netflix has put out. And then also this is where we see organizations having a hybrid cloud strategy, and leveraging clouds like AWS, Azure as part of their overall solution. When we also see organizations doing more containerization, leveraging OpenShift, Docker, Kubernetes, etc. So, but the key idea behind the maturity models was to use the maturity models to drive, measuring an organization, defining a roadmap, leveraging the tool chain, and bringing accelerators. So, the case study, is the work we did, with a very large financial services customer. The overall goals, if we can summarize, mainly. Two main goals, like I mentioned before. One of them, is basically to, reduce the time it takes to market, trying to take new features into production, new, fix defect, bug fixes, migrate it to production, reducing the time it takes to do that, and then improve the TCO, the total cost of ownership. We'll discuss a little bit about the business measures and metrics at the end of this slide. But the problem was, pretty much around, the organization had a lot of manual processes. Build was not automated, and the promotion of code from a lower level environment to a higher level environment, was a very a long drawn-out process with multiple approvals, and the workflow was very complex. So, trying to simplify that, to help bring new features and defect fixes to production quickly. Just a couple key points on the solution. We leveraged our maturity model and our DevOps approach. We also brought in our accelerators and frameworks. Things that we purpose built for helping customers migrate to a higher level of maturity level. We will talk a little bit more about the ServiceNow integration. This is the integration to ticketing systems like ServiceNow. It was a Jenkins plugin we developed that helps capture approvals, and then we also introduced automated smoke and regression tests, and then we also did pipeline as code, which Santosh, our architect, is going to show you as part of the demo. I think the key things, from a business perspective, we were able to reduce the manual processes. 70 to 75% of that processes are automated now. The time to market, a new business rule change, a requirement change, and being able to implement, test, and deploy to production, greatly reduced from 5 days to a few hours. And then the actual build time, now that we have Maven introduced, Mavenizing the application has reduced the the build time from 4 hours plus to around 15 minutes to 17 minutes. But overall, I think the organization has realized about $1 million in annual savings. This is just with one enterprise application, with one pipeline, and we are currently working with our customer on and with about 9 to 10 different applications. So you can see some of these business measures, how they scale up as you start doing this on an enterprise scale across a portfolio of apps. So just to share a few key highlights of the architecture, I think we have done a lot of work, to bring in our frameworks and accelerators like we talked about. And I'm just going to click through this to get to the final picture and then highlight a few things. The main thing, that we needed to do from a financial services perspective was to address SOX compliance. So right at the top, you see the DevOps team, and then you can see the different repositories, the app repo and the infra repo. At the top. So, our best practice is to segregate application code from infrastructure scripts as well as validation script, keeping them in separate repositories, and allows us to implement SOX, compliance in terms of roles and responsibilities and who can see what in different environments. Secondly, on the left-hand side, starting with left-hand side, you can see some of the tools used. Sonar Cube for coverage analysis. We've done Fortify for scanning, and also the build ones, run everywhere. You can see at the bottom we use Artifactory for artifact tracking, and then in the middle you see that we have context-aware pipelines. So we know the pipelines are aware of non-production, production environments. That's an important architectural principle. We need to make sure in order to achieve end-to-end automation. And then the ServiceNow integration that we talked about. And then, also, as part of this effort, we implemented 2 flavors of pipelines, CI/CD, for a lot of the application code, and just CD for third-party shrink wrap, software. So I think we have talked about our DevOps maturity model, DevOps approach, and we talked about our case study. So let's briefly spend a couple minutes on the DevOps tool chain that underlies our approach. So we are, on the screen, what you see is this periodic table of tools from ZBL Labs. We find this to be extremely helpful in understanding the landscape of tools that are out there. And then overlaying this, are the tools that we use. This shows the tools which we frequently bring to engagements that we are using in our current engagements, the tools, around which we have built some frameworks and accelerators. And then this is also the tools where we have a number of partnerships and as part of the DevOps ecosystem that we have developed. From left to right, you can see tools. On the left hand side are the code repository tools like GitHub, and Bitbucket. And on the right-hand side, you can see at the top the AWS, Azure, the deployment, public cloud, where the apps are deployed. Excuse me. And then, underlying this are the release management tools and the support tools, that are, supporting the process of moving the code from, the development all the way to production. But overall, like I mentioned, I think with our framework, accelerators, the tools, and the knowledge that we bring in, we can easily help companies, achieve, build POCs, move up one level, within weeks. And, for large enterprises, I think, in about 9 to 12 weeks, we can help build, take one, really significant enterprise application, convert it, make it Mavenize it, DevOps enable it, and build a pipeline and have continuous integration and delivery capabilities enabled in about 9 to 12 weeks. And lastly, we talked a little bit about our DevOps approach, how security is an important piece, of our approach. We often internally, we refer to our DevOps capabilities as DevSecOps. Security is integrated with our DevOps. And then, also, we are firm believers in ruggedized DevOps. So, I think from that perspective, we have, a number of things that we focus on. One of them is, leveraging the NIST 800-53 framework of security controls. We have developed crosswalks. We have developed mapping tables, from, on-premise controls, industry controls, like financial health service based, and, and map them to, cloud providers. Here's an example. What you see on the screen is a shared responsibility model. You see, this is an example of AWS. At the bottom, you see, responsibility of the vendor, in this case, AWS, around compute, storage, and networking. On the top is where we are focused on building capabilities, like with the mapping and the crosswalk, like I mentioned, and additional, capabilities. Here's where we secure data in motion, data at rest, and address a lot of the customer responsibilities that are there. So together, I think this framework, the DevSecOps, with the focus on security and the tool chain we use for DevOps and the best practices, I think provides a complete solution in terms of leveraging, these tools to be able to, have better time to market metrics, and then reduce the TCO. So with that, let me pause there, and let me hand it over to my colleague Santosh, who is the principal DevOps architect, to take it from here and to do the live demo. Thank you very much.
So this reason for segregation is like twofold. One, primarily to address SOX SOD compliance perspective. So segregation of duties, which is a very key compliance of SOX. So we want to make sure that all the appropriate team members, although we are working in collaboration as a DevOps team, we still want to have some level of segregation there, just to make sure we address the audit needs and the SOX compliance until we mature to a point where each company is in an optimized stage, as based on our maturity model, where we don't need to leverage too much into, or we don't need to look into too much of having this segregation, right? So now we commit the code changes into one of the Git flavors. It could be Git Hub, Git GitLab, Bitbucket, AWS code commit, what have you, any of the Git flavors. So we commit that, we kick off the pipeline, and in this one, the first step that we do is create a change ticket, right? So this change request, so right now, as Harsha also mentioned, we created Jenkins plugin, which connects to ServiceNow, which is one of the widely used service transition tools today, to manage your infrastructure, change requests and change tickets, incidents, and all that good stuff, right? So we have created developed a Jenkins plugin, which will interact seamlessly from the pipeline. This plugin has like a couple of features. It has the ability to create the ticket, update this ticket with relevant information, You also have the ability to check the status of the ticket. So depending on where it is, and assume that you have already the ticket is in a desired state and you don't no longer want to make any updates. We ensure that the pipeline is not making any unnecessary or unwanted updates or uploads. And the final feature of this ServiceNow plugin that we have built is you have the ability to upload all the artifacts that you're generating from the pipeline. So what are these artifacts? So one of the things that we have introduced with this pipeline as a code is we put in different stage gates. So a lot of companies have this mechanism where they have to create these change requests, one per every environment. They do a build per every environment. So in order to deploy to every environment, they have to go through this manual process of creating a change request for UAT, perf, or what have you, any of the control environments that are not managed by the development team, right? So this actually eliminates the need for having to create those different tickets at different levels and minimizes the time to all the manual work, and then automates our processes and obviously reduces our time to market, right? So in this one, we create one change ticket, which we call it as a production change ticket, and this is your change ticket that you would get approvals to from your change control board and all that good stuff, right? And as we go through, at every stage gate, wherever like controlled environments, we have approvals, and only the authorized personnel of that environment can approve. So once whoever approves it, that approver's name, the ID, the timestamp, and all that is logged and then uploaded to ServiceNow for auditing and tracking purposes, right? So once the change ticket is done, we move on to building the source code. So one additional flavor or additional feature of our continuous pipeline is if we create a change ticket for a release or the first execution of the release of the pipeline, right? So what that means, so you have started out a release and this is the first time you're executing the pipeline, and if there was no ServiceNow ticket created, the pipeline would create one for you. The subsequent executions of the pipeline for the same release would not create any change ticket, but rather it would use that same change ticket and keep uploading the data which I just talked about. Now we move on to the build. So from a build standpoint, we use the widely popular build tools, which is Maven, Gradle, and then PowerShell, MS Build. We also have instances where we have used Ant, but we are moving all the customers' applications to move away from Ant and then leverage some of these advanced tools like Maven or Gradle, which will help us manage the dependencies, which will help us speed up the deployments and all that stuff, right? So at the output of the build is what we get a generic image. What with that, what that means is we are only building once, and this deployment artifact that we with this build artifact that we got out of this stage is what we can deploy anywhere at any time, right? So this is an artifact which is environment agnostic. It does not have any properties related to the environments, so you don't need to build an application for every environment because this artifact is what the generic image we call it. We move it into different stages, and we'll just show you how that happens. And as we also put a lot of emphasis onto the code quality checks, right? So one of the things like we have looked at, like a lot of customers don't in their applications didn't have unit testing. So obviously we are not going to start building out unit tests for the customers, but we start out encouraging, and within our implementation we have them start building out at least a simple coverage, at least to start with, like a 5 to 10% of coverage, right? And what we do once we have this coverage, we make decisions based on the output of the outcome of that unit test. So obviously pipeline and Maven, when you're running these things, if it fails, it automatically stops. But there are instances where we also make a threshold based analysis. So if you have like 80% of the unit test coverage, which out of the unit test that you have created, then we move on and not actually fail the pipeline. So those kind of controls have been put into place within our pipeline. And then obviously sonar scans, which we run this sonar scans, code quality scans, check style, and then code coverage. And all these things are published to sonar dashboard. And we also run the vulnerability scans using Fortify, right? So what this means, so we are also helping customers to reduce their technical debt, identify how much technical debt they have in their applications, and then go through these, and then in due course of time start putting emphasis and time into reducing this technical debt, right? So a couple of things that we have also done on the scans part is we also inspect how based on the thresholds defined by the customers. So some customers have like, okay, I need to have I we shouldn't have any critical errors within the scans. So if there's even at least one critical, we just stop the pipeline. We don't move forward. Or you can have like some little bit more appetite saying, okay, I don't want critical, I don't want any major. So all those controls can be adopted and put in place into our continuous delivery pipeline. Now, the generic image gets pushed to a binary repository like Artifactory or Nexus, or in some cases S3, which can also be used as a repository. And this is the repository which we just build out, and it is environment agnostic, and it will move on. It will stay there, which can be deployed to all different environments. Now let's go into the deployment part. All right, so this is where prior to deploying, we perform infrastructure tests. So what this means? So for any company which is on-prem, which is on cloud, providing running these infrastructure tests is a key component, because it will emphasize it will provide us the value, like certain things, that do you have the enough disk space before you can deploy. So if your disk space is running out, like based on a threshold like 80 85, and you cannot even deploy your application, so why even go through that step of even deploying, right? Validating whether you have the right software versions within that infrastructure that you have, because if you don't have those, so again, it doesn't make sense to deploy that code and then roll it back and go through all those manual process or what have you. So here we perform the infrastructure test, and as part of the deployment, we use one of the configuration management tools, either Chef, Ansible, or Puppet. And in this case, in our demo, we're going to show you how we used Chef. And this is the place where we actually take the generic image from Artifactory, and then we do the token replacement. So now we build out one application, one package or a binary, which is environment specific. So whichever environment you're trying to deploy, that is where we are going to replace the tokens. And then finally, our pipeline is going to end with automated smoke tests or regression tests, depending on the kind of environment that you're looking at. So if you just have, if it's a dev, we probably run smoke tests like dev UAT, yeah, QA, we run regression, and so on and so forth. So like that, we can add like multiple stage gates, multiple blocks into our pipeline, which is a plug and play. And our pipeline, we also have several reusable components that we have built in terms of auditing, creating an audit report out of your pipeline, capturing the detailed build metrics of your pipeline, and things like that. So now let me go into some action where we'll show you our demo. Uh, so just so building on top of what we just talked about in the workflow, right? So this is our this is our Jenkins environment, and this is our pipeline code, which it is all declarative programming. It is one piece of code which we can use for different environments, as Harsha mentioned. Whether it's in you have different Jenkins instances like non-prod, prod, you don't need to create like two different code bases. You just create like one pipeline which works in both environments, right? So in this demo, I'm going to walk you through two use cases. One, we are going to execute a pipeline which will create a ServiceNow ticket which will perform the application build, and then will show us like how we are seeking an approval from a person to before we deploy, and then deploys to one environment, which is the integration environment. Now, the subsequent run, we are going to deploy this to the QA environment, where we are not going to create a ServiceNow ticket. We are not going to build the application, but we are just directly going to start doing the deployment to the QA environment. So let me just, I just kicked off this one. So uh, for this demo, what we have done, we are creating the ServiceNow ticket. So you can see this is the build number, which is like 129. So we should see, once the ticket is created, we should see a new change ticket with the build number as 129. So we can add like a lot of metadata into this ServiceNow. It's all API driven. It's all JSON. So whatever text you want, you can add the start dates, end dates. You can add a lot of information like which department this belongs to, who are the change coordinators, what are the change groups, what kind of deployment it is, and so on and so forth. So everything you can carry forward with your pipeline, and then create this ServiceNow ticket. So we just created this ticket, which is for 2.0 release from so and so build number, which is like 129. So we can add like a lot of these fields which are mandatory, non-mandatory, and then have the ticket ready. So as you can see, we went through creating the change ticket. We built the application, which took like 27 seconds. It's a very simple Mismo application where it processes Mismo requests and sends Mismo responses. We ran the static analysis, and then now the pipeline is actually waiting for an approval uh, before it can proceed into deploying to an environment. So here, as you can see, this is the approval screen. The emails are sent out with this link to appropriate teams, whoever are the owners of the of that environment. So here, when they click on the link, they'll be logged into this page where they can see all the details that are required for them to whether make a decision whether they want to proceed or abort, right? So here we are telling this is the environment, this is the application, this is the version, and then we are seeking their approval. So let me go ahead, hit proceed, right? And in the instance that if we do an abort, the pipeline stops there and it doesn't move forward. One of the other features of pipeline that brings that's a very value add is the parallel executions. So we can run a lot of things in parallel. So here we are actually creating two instances. We are bootstrapping two instances, and then we're not doing this in sequence. So we're taking these two instances in two different availability zones, which is AWS West 2A and West 2C, and then both of these are getting bootstrapped in parallelly at the same time. And our deployment also happens in parallel, and a lot of things. So especially in our specific case study that Harsha walked through. So one of the things that the business benefit that we provided was like bringing down the build time from 4 hours to like 17 minutes. So that was exactly because of the parallel execution that we were able to perform, and then build all 16 modules of that one application in parallel at the same time, right? So let me also take a moment to show our dashboard, which is our Kibana dashboard. So before I came to the screen and did a refresh, there were only 10 instances. So now, since we just bootstrapped 2 additional instances, and you can see the number getting reflected as 12, you can drill down by what kind of instance types it is, what kind of number of instances based on the instance type, and what is the instance status as well, right? So we have like a lot of dashboards that we have built in, especially one. This will give you a full overview of what is your footprint on AWS. So as we keep building, tearing down, this number keeps growing and coming down. And one good thing that we've also done is we have built a couple of reusable components with this pipeline. So especially the audit report. So there was like a need for some customer that they wanted to know And now with this entire automated process, they were not able to really tie some of the things from their audit perspective. So what was created in the ServiceNow ticket and what's getting deployed, it was like a very hard time for them to consolidate all this view. So we built a reusable component where, since the pipeline has all the knowledge, all the intelligence, we took that data, transformed into a simple HTML format, and then we just showcase them audit report, and we upload that into ServiceNow ticket, right? So, and also with all these reusable components and then our frameworks that we put in place for this continuous delivery pipeline, today, for any customer who is at managed and measured from a maturity model level, we are rolling out a pipeline implementation in 9 to 12 weeks. So this is what we have uh, done repeatedly at different customers, and then this is our model that we are able to deliver at this time. So now we are just registering the instances with the load balancer. It'll take a few minutes, but in the interim, let me go ahead and kick off the next use case, which where we are not going to create a change ticket. We are not going to create uh, we're not going to rebuild the application, but rather we are just going to deploy to a different environment. So all this information is basically driven, the entire pipeline is basically driven by a simple configuration JSON file that we have. So as you can see in this JSON file, we have all the necessary details that are required for us to perform this continuous delivery pipeline, right? So here we are just changing the environment name. So if you have like multiple environments, you don't need to come and change this, but rather you can give a list of all environments, and then it will deploy sequentially one after the other to all the different environments, right? So it also that's how we say like we are able to do this build once, deploy anywhere. It doesn't repeat the same thing again and again. So let me just kick off this build, which will, as we'll see very soon, that will skip all these steps and directly go to the deployment approval request, right? Um, in just a minute. So as you can see, it skipped everything, and then it finally jumped into the deployment approval request. And here we can see that now we're seeking an approval for a QA environment, right? So as you go through these, so you have like different stages where you are going through all the different environments, and then you're capturing the stages. And let me go back to the slide deck, where I just want to spend like 30 seconds on the architecture of what we just showcased in our demo. So here we can see that this is the architecture where we have our entire demo, the CI/CD pipeline. We have deployed in AWS. This is a AWS architecture, right? So we have a Jenkins instance sitting in our VPC in one availability zone. So we just spun up Bootstrap 2 instances, right, for this application. We pulled everything from AWS code commit. And then the two instances were Bootstrap deployed with Tomcat 8 on it, and then the application was deployed there. And finally, we attached them to the load balancer and we ran the smoke test, right? And also moving on to then this is kind of the dashboards that we have, like the ELK dashboard that we just went through, what we showcased in our demo, and then our Hygia dashboards where Harsha was talking more in detail, like how we capture all what do you call the sprint details, the build metrics, the build code repositories, the static data, code quality checks, all this good stuff at one single glass of paint, right? Now, with that, thank you very much, and I will now we are now open for questions. So we have a couple of questions here. So this is from Sunil, so how do you secure production? So in terms of if I understand correctly, so securing from this pipeline perspective. So if that's a question, so basically we have done two things. So one, the code we have like as we have it in a different sorry, we have it in a different repository. We also have the ability to segregate them into two different branches. So the master, which is owned by a separate team, which has more controls from a segregation perspective duties. So they manage all the master, which they just push from the release or feature branch to the master branch, and then they we just perform a deployment to the different environments. So from I'm not sure if that answers your question. If that was your what do you mean by secure? That's what you meant by security, right? Now, let me move on to the next question. With all the tools you have in an end-to-end stacks, what are some of the challenges that you faced in integration? This is from Narayana Mukamala. Yeah, so with the tools were not really some of the challenges. Basically, primarily what we have seen is a lot of companies still have this issue where they have to go through a lot of processes in between, right? A lot of different teams. Collaboration and coordination is one of the primary aspects that we put a lot of emphasis on, right? So if we have the right team, the decision makers, the right team, and if you're able to collaborate with them, which is what we have done with one of our in the case study client that we just showcased, where this was the key principle, and then like how that's why we are claiming and saying that we are able to roll out this in like 9 to 10 weeks of 9 to 12 weeks for a company which is in managed and measured. And when coming to the tool set, so a couple of things where especially where companies where they cannot they have to go through the process of validate which is putting a new request to get the software libraries into the place, right, into all these things into your company, and then setting them up, installing them, and all that good stuff. But other issues were like not having the right team involved, and then not having the right libraries there. So those were like few of the challenges that we face. But since we have done this over and over again, so now we kind of know like what exactly we need to go. So unless it's a completely different new flavor of things that you're bringing into picture, we can take a look at those. The next question is from Jason Peter, how much time would reference implementation take? So as we mentioned, our pipeline implementations, we are now with all the reusable components libraries that we have built for pipeline delivery, and with our framework that we have where we have all these build once, deploy anywhere, and all stage gates and all that good stuff. We are looking for a company who is in the managed and measured state for 9 to 12 week implementation. For initial, it would take a few more weeks more than this 12 weeks, but it all depends on like what stage of initial they are in, right? Because we need to know where how much of what is their architecture, what is their state of architecture today, and all that good stuff. The next question, when also show test automation execution after build is deployed? Bhavya Gonapudi. So yeah, I think sorry, we got this late. So test automation execution after build is deployed. Yeah, so what we do is, since this test code, automation code is sitting in a Git repository, right? We pull the source code, the branch, and all those details are configured within that simple JSON file that we just showed at the end. So we take that code, we don't have anything built out, and then we don't run the executables at that time. Basically, you're running everything in the context of Maven or Gradle. So it's on at runtime, you're making this call, which runs the code and then executes against the target servers. So if you would like to know more details about like how this execution happens, please shoot us an email. We'll be happy to send out more details on the implementation and have a separate demo. We are starting the, I think we have one last question. So after that, close. We are starting fresh with DevOps. We have previously done Agile and Scrum development. What are some of the challenges for someone starting new with DevOps? So I would say, like, if we go back, there are like several different things. So one, if in our presentation, we also told our DevOps approach, where we want to put emphasis more on the organizational change management. So that is where I think it should be a top-down, it should trickle down from top to bottom, especially the organizational change management, setting up the teams and working in collaboration. I would say that is one of the biggest challenges. If we cannot have the buy-in from all the teams who are involved in this, obviously it will be a difficult challenge to move forward with. With that, I hope you all have enjoyed our presentation. Thank you very much for your time in joining us this afternoon again, and we'll share the webinar will be on our website, and then please feel free to send us any questions.